The reality is that most people don't start saving until they're in their 20s or 30s. What percentage of your income you should be saving is more tied to what your age is than the actual percentage itself. So if you're younger, chances are you can get away with saving less percentage of your income, assuming that your income is going to gradually go up as your career advances. I think the problem with budgeting is that a lot of people want to see this big change right away, and it doesn't happen that fast. If you're really deep in the hole, it's going to take some time for you to dig yourself out of that. As you start building, it's like a snowball effect. You gotta have to be patient with yourself and take one step at a time.
Miguel Delgado is back on the show, everyone. Miguel, thank you for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me.
I've gotten a lot of questions about what you do for a living from the last episode. People are really excited to talk about finances and what to do with their money, especially people in our generation. So we've already talked a little bit before I turn the cameras on. So there's a lot of good stuff that we know we're going to talk about here. But before we do, you have an announcement you want to make to everybody.
Yeah, I am very excited to announce that I am starting at a new firm called Legacy Wealth Management. It's a firm based out of Boise, Idaho. They are an RIA, and yeah, I'll be continuing to do a lot of the same stuff I was doing before, but now it's really a big upgrade for me and for my clients, so I'm really excited about it. I'll be able to do a lot more than I was in the past.
That's awesome. Wait, are you moving to Boise?
No, not anytime soon.
Jeez. So this step up that you're doing now, talk about how really fast, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of it, of what you've been learning so far, working, was it about 10 years at Peak 360?
It was 2.5 years there and then 10 years of the firm before that. Okay,
so with everything that you've learned, what is it about this next step that allows you to expand what your knowledge is and who you can reach?
Yeah, honestly, I've just been listening to my clients, right? And I think that's really important for any business person, is to listen to their customers, listen to their clients, listen to what they're saying, and listen to what they're asking. So one question that I've been getting asked a lot, especially during times of volatility in the market, like when the markets are down, the question I get is, hey, Miguel, look, I know the market's down. I know this out of our control, but is there anything else that we could be doing right now to grow our wealth or to preserve our wealth besides just the stock market? And, I know we have to write it out and all that stuff, but is there anything else, right? And for a long time, the answer was, we just kind of have to write it out. This is a normal part of the process. This is just an economic cycle. The markets come down, they eventually come back up, and we just have to ride the roller coaster, per se. Well, that answer works for some people, but it doesn't work for other people. And the types of clients that I represent, who are typically within call it the net worth of 5 to 10 million, they're really looking for something else. What are some of the things that we can be getting into that we can grow our wealth year in and year out, no matter what the market is doing? And that might mean being invested in other things outside of the stock market. So it could be real estate, could be private equity, could be hedge funds, could be a variety of different types of things, commodities. And so those are some of the things that I'll be doing a lot more of. So I'm really excited about it.
What are these different retirement accounts out there? People know about 401k, or they hear about it all the time. In government, there's something called a 457B, which is the same as a 401k just for government employees. Then you got a 503C or 502, the one that you leave for your kids' college funds. There's so many things out there, so many acronyms that the average man doesn't even know about. So let's start there. Can you sort of break down what some of these retirement accounts are?
Sure.
Who they're made for, and can you even take advantage of multiple of them?
Yeah. Yes and yes. So let's start with the traditional IRA. Traditional IRA, well, actually, let me take a quick step backwards. There are, and I think I mentioned this in the last podcast, there are 3 different tax breaks that you can get from the government. Real quick, they are the tax deduction. That's money going in before taxes, pre-tax. There is a tax deferral. So the money inside of the account is growing tax deferred. So you're not paying taxes on an annual basis from that investment growth. And then the third tax break is tax-free withdrawals. So that's taking money out of the account tax-free. So when you put it all together, the tax deduction is when you put money into an account, it's pre-tax. When the account balance grows, it's tax-deferred. And then when you take the money out, it's tax-free. Those are 3 different tax breaks that you're going to get. So in remembering that, let's talk about these different types of accounts. There's a traditional IRA. Traditional IRA, I mean, it's basically an individual IRA. Anybody can open one. There's some income limitations. I'll get to that in a moment. But basically, the traditional IRA, you can put money into it pre-tax. So if you make $50,000 and you put $5,000 into the account, right, you're going to be taxed on 45 because you got a $5,000 tax deduction. That money is going to grow tax deferred, and then when you take the money out for retirement, you're going to be taxed on it. It's pretty straightforward. There are some limitations as to how much you can contribute to the traditional IRA. Right now, I believe it's $6,000 or
somewhere around 6,000.
6,000, 6,500. And then if you're over the age of 50, you get an extra catch-up provision that you can add a little bit more. So so that's the traditional IRA. Now there are some income limitations, meaning that you could open up an IRA regardless of your income. However, you can't get a tax deduction if you're over a certain threshold, and you need to talk to your tax advisor to figure out if you qualify for that. Now the Roth IRA, very, very similar limitations on the income and on the contribution, but the taxes are different. So if we look back to those 3 tax breaks that you get, instead of getting the tax deduction, you don't get that, but you get the tax deferral and you get the tax-free withdrawal, right? So who should be using what? If you are more interested in going to get tax deduction, use the IRA. If you're more interested in making sure that you never pay taxes again when you take the money out, the Roth IRA might be a better option. And then there are other things like there's 401ks, 403bs, 457s, and a lot of this has to do with your line of work. If you're a teacher, you're most likely going to have a 403b. If you're a police officer or a fireman, you're most likely going to have a 457. If you are a W-2 employee at a corporation or whatever, you're going to have a 401k. Ultimately, all 3 of them, the tax code is very similar. They're almost identical. You can contribute up to $22,500 if you're over in 2023. If you're over the age of 50, you can contribute up to $30,000 in that account. But the taxes are exactly the same as the IRA. The money going in is pre-tax. It grows tax deferred, and then you pay taxes at the end. So that knocks that out. And then there's the SEP IRA. I know you get there's a lot of questions about that.
A lot of business owners around here who have that or want to know what that means because they qualify, but they don't even know what's the difference.
Or maybe, I have a side hustle and, I want to be able to contribute money to some type of retirement account. SEP IRAs are great for that. A SEP IRA is basically an account that's meant for 1099s or any kind of business owner. So if you're a business owner or you're a 1099, you're not a W-2 employee, you can qualify for a SEP IRA. Now, you can do this all on your own. You can go to Schwab, Fidelity, whoever the custodian you want it to be. Now, the contribution rules are a little bit different. You kind of want to talk to your CPA about what the formula they want to use, but generally it's about 20 to 25% of your income is how much you can contribute. And then there's a maximum. So it's 20 to 25% of your income up to, I believe the number is around $67,000 if you're under the age of 50, and if you're over the age of 50, it's a little higher than that. But that's what it is. If you have employees, you do not want a SEP IRA because it's going to be very, very expensive. I will also say if you do have employees, having a 401k plan these days, starting a new plan, there are some pretty attractive tax credits available as an incentive for employers to adopt a 401k plan. So if you're a business owner and you've been thinking about it, you've been on the fence of whether you should have a 401k plan or not, now's the time to really look into it because there's some tax credits available that weren't available before.
So for most of us here who aren't in finances, it's a lot of types of accounts. Can you combine them? Because some people say you can get a 401k, then you can get a Roth IRA, but you can to a certain point, correct?
Let's say I work for Starbucks and I want to contribute to an IRA. I have a 401k through my job and I want to have a Roth IRA. Well, if you max out the 401k through work, you can't contribute to really anything else. Maybe a Roth IRA, but you can't double dip, right? So there's certain limitations. If you think about it, an easy way to think about it is, what are the limitations? If the contribution limitation for the IRA is, call it $6,500, and you max out the traditional IRA, you can't do $6,500 into the traditional and also $6,500 into the Roth. You got to pick one of the two or do half and half.
Gotcha. So for example, in 2023, the total contribution limit for the IRS is $22,500. So if you want to max out your Roth IRA at $6,500, you only have $16,000 left maximum you could put into your 401k.
Potentially, because your 401k may also have a Roth option.
Okay.
So if your employer offers a Roth 401k option available, you're actually maybe even better off using that.
Of saving for retirement just isn't even in the radar right now. That they have priorities now. So I know that you're going into an area where you're dealing with the clientele that has a different set of issues that they're trying to work with. But if we think back to, your average everyday person, what is it that we can do to help them work on that aspect first in terms of budgeting? Because it's so expensive to live here, so that they have the ability to potentially save for the future, so they don't have to work till they're 80 or whatever.
Yeah, that's a tough one, working on the budgeting, because one of the things that I've started to do is offering pro bono services. I wish I could do more of it, where I could take on a bunch of pro bono cases, but I'm only able to handle so many. But what I've learned from that is I'm not doing a lot for these people. Really, it's just having conversations with them and talking to them about everyday finances, because it's a big shift for people to have to. It's a mind shift of how they view money. So an example, I'm working with a pro bono client. And for those of you who may not be aware, pro bono, I'm not charging for my services. I'm not really getting anything for it other than, just providing value to somebody. And by the way, there's other CFPs. If you go to the CFP website, cfp.com or cfp.net, you can find a CFP that might be able to offer services for free if you qualify for that. But I think what they are benefiting a lot from is they had a situation, this couple that I'm working with, they have kids, they're living paycheck to paycheck, they have debt, lots of debt. They don't know how they're going to make things work out, right? They want to buy a house. They don't have much discretionary income. They have kids who, one of them, for example, is about to have a once in a lifetime opportunity to go to the Galapagos Islands. He's in high school and wants to go to the Galapagos Islands because he wants to be, he wants to be a marine biologist or something like that. That's his dream. And so this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. It's going to cost them $5,000 or something like that to fund this trip. They're $20,000 to $30,000 in debt. So like, where do we start, right? We need to plan for retirement. We need to leave money for our children. We have this big expense coming up. We're in debt. Where do we start? So we just started with very simple, like let's just look at your bank account. Let's start looking at your transaction histories and what are some of the things that we can cut back on. And so the first step for them was changing this mentality of spending first and saving later. They were in this habit of, okay, every month, we are going to try to, limit as much as we can on our expenses. And then at the end of the month, whatever's left over, we're going to set that aside. Well, what ended up happening was nothing was ever left over at the end of the month. They ended up spending everything. So I said, look, we really need to change things. We need to start really talking about what are your actual expenses? What needs to be, we need to plan a month ahead of time. So next month, you're going to really budget yourself. These are your fixed expenses, your rent, right? Your cell phone bills. Those things are not going away. But the other stuff that we do have control over, like spending money on going to Starbucks or spending money on, frivolous things, right? How can we control that? And so let's set a budget for this. Let's set a budget for how much we're going to spend when we go to Target. Let's set a budget for how much we're going to spend when we need to order something from Amazon, right? If we need to order a new tea kettle, let's set a budget for that and not just buy something that's going to cost more than what we should be spending on, right? So being really intentional with what we're spending on, that's not the answer most people want to hear, but it really does take a lot of work. And it's been helping them a lot because we've been at it for about 3 months now. And the last conversation I had with them went really well, where they just said, hey, look, we decided to follow your advice. We have our entire month spent for, so we have zero left to save, but we're adding a lot of money to our debt, and we're not going to have any extra money to do anything else. But it feels somewhat good knowing that even though we're like at a net zero, we're still moving the needle forward, right? And it's, I think the problem with budgeting is that a lot of people want to see this big change right away, and it doesn't happen that fast, right? If you're really deep in the hole, it's going to take some time for you to dig yourself out of that. And then as you start building, it's like a snowball effect. It just gets faster and faster and faster, but you gotta have to be patient with yourself and take one step at a time. Gotcha.
And I think that story there that you just gave is tantamount to how a lot of people do think about money. I have somebody close to me who at one time was making $400,000 or $500,000 a year just doing sales. And I'd ask him, okay, so how much do you have saved? He's like, honestly, I have no concept of how to deal with money. I just sort of get it in, and then I go out and I spend it on whatever. And it's amazing to me that with that much of an income, and this is 20 years ago before things really took off in the Bay Area, that saving for retirement or putting some of it away wasn't a concept that crossed his mind. And in a way, it's something that I think a lot of people have. I know I'm supposed to save money. I know I'm supposed to invest, that I don't want to keep doing this job forever because I just can't keep doing it forever. But right now, I just don't see how I could even do it because life is expensive. You hear the horror stories on TV about eggs going up, milk's going up, the gas is going up, and now we have a war in Israel, and how's that going to affect the stock markets and the oil prices? So people start getting this whole fear mentality that, hey, it's just, I don't know how I'm going to do this. So what are some of the things that you've seen from people that might be the biggest misconceptions that they have about even saving or what retirement actually is?
Yeah. So kind of finishing that thought, right? Like you were mentioning your friend making $400,000 and spending everything first, right? So I think the first misconception is that we're just going to be able to figure this out on our own, right? It's really difficult to do that because we don't have a crystal ball. We can't see 10, 20, 30 years down the road. And I'm not saying this to promote myself, but I am saying this to promote the industry in general. I think a lot of people should be working with a professional. It doesn't have to be me. I can't take everybody on as a client, but I think one of the beauties of working with an advisor is they have the ability and the technology to help you see 10, 30, 40 years ahead. So what I mean by that is we may have all these ideas of how we can move our money today, but we don't know how that's going to look like 10, 20, 30 years down the road. For example, if you're making $50,000 a year, $200,000 a year, whatever that number is, and we see all kinds of things on TikTok and Instagram about how you can make money and all of that stuff. Let's pick on real estate for an example. There's a lot of ways that you can generate wealth with real estate, and it's very true. But how is this going to look for your portfolio? Okay. So once you can actually see a picture, a forecast that shows here's my wealth today, and I can literally pull up a report that shows what my wealth will look like 20 years from now if I keep doing what I'm doing. If I'm saving 20% of my income, if I'm investing in real estate at this amount on an annual basis or whatever the case is, I can create that scenario and actually see the numbers, right? See projections. The beauty of that is that information allows us to make better decisions today. Because I can see that and say, all right, well, that doesn't look as good as I thought it would. What if instead of saving 15% of my income, I save 25% of my income? How does that look? And what if instead of getting a 6% rate of return, I can get an 8% rate of return? How does that look like? And what if instead of investing it in just any kind of investment, I'm saving into something that's pre-tax? How does that affect my situation now? And we can forecast that, right? So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that people can just figure this out on their own. And most people can, but you got to realize to a certain extent, you're kind of shooting in the dark, right? Because without really seeing what it looks like long term, it's difficult to know whether you're making the best decision right now.
For the average person, when is a good time to say, I need to go talk to a financial planner and get my act together for the future? Is it when they have kids? Is it when they hit 21? Is it when they're 40? When's a good time for them to say, I need help with this?
It's generally never too early, and it's also never too late, right? So I'll kind of give you two ends of the spectrum here. I have a client today. He's married. He has one child, and he's about to have a second. He started working with me when I started in the very beginning. He might have had $5,000 as an investment. So he didn't have much to invest, but I was starting out. I took him on as a client, and we kind of grew together. Now, he started really young, and he started making a lot of good decisions on his own, but also with, I will say, with a lot of my guidance. We created a structure. We put a plan in place that kind of set the roadmap and the pace for how things would be going. We decided how much you would be saving on an annual basis, and all that good stuff. So I would say, if you're in your early 20s, you're making a decent amount of income, you're past that stage of living paycheck to paycheck, or even if you are living paycheck to paycheck, it may be difficult to find a financial advisor or a financial planner that would be willing to work with you. I have to be honest. But there are financial planning services out there that are available at either no cost or very reasonable costs. I won't mention the names, but if you just Google free financial planning or subscription-based financial planning, you will find some resources online that again, if you don't have the assets, if you're not at that level where an advisor would be willing to work with you, there are some services out there. But on the other end of the spectrum, it's not too late either. I mean, I've worked with clients who are in their 50s or 60s. They have very little saved up, and the conversation is this: all right, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, we have 5-10 years before retirement. We can't fool around anymore. These 5 to 10 years are crucial. Like, we can't make any mistakes. We have to make, these next 5 to 10 years are the most important years of your life, because once you retire, that's it. We can go out and get a part-time job maybe, but these are your highest earning years. Once you quit that job that's paying you that salary, that's allowing you to save money, that's it, right? Well, we can't go back to work when we're 85 or 90. It's going to be very difficult. So the sooner you can start, the better. Get some guidance, get a mentor. If you could find an advisor, whether it's pro bono or you're able to afford paying them a fee, it's highly recommended. It's no different than somebody saying, "Hey, I want to be a bodybuilder," mm-hmm. right? You could either do it on your own and maybe make it, or you can hire a professional that has consistently trained people to win competitions, right? And so where do you want to be in? Do you want to work with somebody that's going to help you get there, or do you want to do it on your own?
Well, so with that, if you're talking about somebody that doesn't know anything about finances, it's like looking for a real estate agent. How do you even know what questions to ask to know if this person is right for me, or if they just want my money and they're going to give me advice that maybe what doesn't pertain to me? So what advice can you give to somebody that says, I'm ready to look for this? I have no clue where to start, and I have no clue how to pick this person from that person, other than this person may be more popular and they charge more, so I think they should be better, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. So what questions would you advise somebody to say, ask these of your financial planners that you're thinking about using to see if they are a right fit for you?
Yeah. So one of the first questions you want to ask is, how are you paid? It's a very transparent question. And if you are hiring somebody, it needs to be really clear for you to understand how they're being paid. Are you paying them a fee out of pocket? Are they taking a percentage from your investments? Are they going to get paid a commission? And there's nothing wrong with however they intend on doing things. You should need to be aware of it so that you are aware of, are the recommendations that they're making, are they tied to any other investment incentive for them? Right? If they're on a commission basis, there may be an incentive there for them to make a certain type of recommendation. If I'm paying them a fee, well, then it doesn't really matter what they recommend because I'm paying them the same fee, right? If they're not getting paid anything, then it needs to be really clear. How is this free? Are you doing this pro bono? Because you don't want to work with an advisor who's just not charging you anything, right? I mean, you want them to be successful and be in business so that they can, it's no different than your bank. You want them to make money so that they can be in business and hold on to your funds, right? So you want an advisor who, there's nothing wrong with an advisor getting paid, but you just need to be really clear about how they're getting paid. So that's number one.
All right. How do you use that to interpret, okay, does that mean he could be working for me, or maybe his or her advice isn't necessarily tied to so let's put it in the perspective of, we'll say the average person, and I know we're in the Bay Area, so our salaries are skewed compared to the rest of the country. It's just kind of the way Silicon Valley is. So for the average person in the Bay Area, let's say they're making $70,000, which I know it's a lot if you're in Kansas or Nebraska, but here, let's say $70,000. And they have a budget that allows them to put something away, but they need help figuring out what to do. So what does the financial planners that they're asking, what does it matter necessarily how they're getting paid, and how does that factor into their decision making? And then once they figure that part out, okay, now what else do they want to ask?
The second thing that they should try to figure out is how the process works.
Okay.
Right. And there's different phases throughout the process. There's the beginning phase, there's sort of the middle phase, and then there's the ongoing phase. So in the beginning phase, in this first initial meeting, if you're talking to this advisor, you should try to reveal as much as you can about your situation. The conversation is going to be confidential, so you shouldn't be too concerned about that. But try to give the advisor as much information as you can so that you want to be able to test, is this advisor, how are they going to take all of this information and then be able to give me some advice? You want to get a taste, some kind of an idea of how this advisor is going to use that data, that information that they're collecting from you, and then turn around and say, here's something that you should be thinking about. So I wouldn't expect for the advisor to turn around basis, how long is it going to take for you to ultimately come back and say, here are my recommendations, right? Is it going to take a month? Is it going to take 3 months? Is it 6 months? So have a really clear understanding of what this relationship is going to look like until you have this final product.
Okay.
Right? And then the last phase is the ongoing. Okay, so now everything's done. We have a plan in place. We've set up the accounts. All this is good. Now what does that relationship look like? Are we meeting annually, once a year? Are we meeting quarterly? Are you available for all, unlimited emails and phone calls? What can you be available for, and what are you not available for? Right? You need to have a really good understanding. Now, the advisor should be telling you this anyways, but if they're not, then you should be asking. And if it's not clear, then keep looking until it is.
What does it matter if they're getting paid a commission versus a fee? Because your average person is going to go in and they may not know, okay, does this mean you're working for me? Does this mean you're more incentivized by how many you sell? And then also, if I think I'm getting good advice, how do I know that I'm getting good advice? Or maybe a better question could be, here's some things that a financial planner might tell you that can say that they may not be a good fit for you. If they're leading you that way or whatnot, let's help them make it easier for the average person to know he answered my question, so I think it's good, but how do I really know?
Yeah, I mean, you need to look out for what's in it for me, right? For what's in it for you. And so as an example, how my conversations go in the beginning, what I tell people is, this is, in order for us to work together, it needs to be a no-brainer, right? I need to be able to justify to you, Mr. Client, that the fee that I'm charging is worth it, right? If I'm charging you, for example, $5,000 to do a plan, and the value that I'm bringing to the table is only worth $3,000, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But if I could identify within the first 30 minutes of us talking together, hey, based off everything that you've told me, I think that there's some things that we can do where we can potentially save you approximately $50,000 in your taxes this year, hypothetically speaking.
Hypothetically, right.
Right. And that does happen. But if that were the case, and I'm charging $5,000 to do a financial plan, is it worth paying $5,000 knowing that I could be able to get a $50,000 tax deduction? Maybe, right? So it needs to be a no-brainer. So in other words, ask questions to try to figure out, what am I getting from this, right? Where's my win, right? What is this advisor going to do for me? So if I'm paying a fee, whether it's $100 a month or $2,000 or $5,000 or whatever the fee is, or even if I'm paying a percentage on the investment, what am I getting in return, right? And so some advisors might struggle with that. They may say, I can't guarantee you anything, but it's up to the advisor to really sell themselves and be able to articulate, here is the value that I'm going to be able to provide for you. And gotcha. It's sometimes a gut feeling, but a lot of times it's numbers, right? If they can't articulate it and the numbers don't make sense, or if you're getting a gut feeling of like, this just doesn't seem like it's what I'm looking for, then just go a different direction. Does that help?
It does, because it speaks to the human interaction. Like, I got to be able to talk to you and know that you get it.
Yeah.
And I have to believe in what your message is. I have to believe not necessarily in your experience. You've been doing this 20 years, but especially if I get recommended to you by somebody that I know and I trust, and they tell me, here's what Miguel did for me. I spent this much money, and here's every year that he's helped me, and here's how much I've been saving. That helps build trust with you, because I've already seen an example of how you help somebody that I know. So is it fair to say it's a smart idea, if you're brand new to this, to shop around? I go to Miguel first. I see what he charges and what he could do for me. Now I'm going to go visit John, and then John tells me, okay, here's my fee or how I get paid. Here's what I can do for you. And then start seeing, okay, here's my options, what may be the better one to work with. And then also, where is that gut feeling? This person, maybe the numbers aren't as good as the other person, but he gets me. He knows what I'm going through, or she knows what I'm going through. She relates to me because she has 2 kids, I have 2 kids, or we're about the same age, and we have good idea of where we both want to go in life, and we're kind of going a similar path. I think that person's advice may be more beneficial for me. Does that sound like something?
Absolutely, yeah. This is very much a relationship business. To the advisor, this is a relation. So most advisors are looking for long-term relationships. So you as the client, you as the prospective client, should be thinking about this as a long-term relationship. And so you just said something that's really key. The advisor needs to be able to demonstrate that they understand the client. And so one of the things that you should be looking for is, if after you've, shared all this information about yourself, and it could be really difficult because you have to be pretty vulnerable. eliminates that whole thought of, did they recommend this because they're getting a commission, right? And they're getting paid this big lump sum commission up front, or was this really in the best interest for me, right? And so by eliminating all of that, it just makes things a little easier, right? Working with somebody who's charging you a flat fee or a percentage. With regards to the percentage, it really depends, right? There's some advisors who charge 1.5%, 1%, 0.6%, whatever the case is. If you're paying 1.5% or call it 2%, and the advisor is investing in stuff that you could do yourself on Schwab or Fidelity or whatever, wherever you can invest money in, it's probably not a good trade-off. But if you're paying 1.5% or 2%, and that advisor is really bringing in some value, you're saving money in taxes on an annual basis. Your rate of return, you're being introduced to products that are returning you, 8, 10, 12% or more, then sure. I mean, would I complain about paying a 2% fee if if my accounts are growing significantly? No. If I can't do it on my own, then no, right? So it needs to be justified, right? Is the value that you're getting in return for the fee worth it? What I'm more concerned about is less about the fees and more about the taxes. What is my advisor? Now, this is more true for maybe not people who are making 70,000, 100,000 a year, but maybe 200,000 and above. Is my advisor, what are they doing from a tax planning standpoint? That's the biggest value, because we're losing so much more money in taxes than we are in paying fees.
Gotcha. Okay. And that's something separate from your tax professional. You had to go to a financial planner to say, here's your whole thing, and then your tax man just does his side of it. They're two separate things.
Yeah, the tax man or the tax woman, their job is to look at this year and the past. They're trying to figure out, how do we reduce your tax liability for 2022 or into 2023. They're often not looking at, how do we make sure that we're saving taxes in 2030, in 2050. So your advisor is thinking 10, 20, 30 years down the road and saying, all right, here are some of the things that we need to do now so that we can consistently be saving taxes down the road.
Got it. Okay. That whole thing sounds helpful. Now I have a good idea. If I go and talk to a financial planner, here's the difference in how they're getting paid and what could benefit me, what could not. And here's the value I need to look for that they could bring me. And ultimately, do they get me? Do they get where I'm going in life? Are we on a similar path? If I'm 25 and my financial planner is 80, doesn't mean he doesn't understand me, but there may be a difference in bias, which leads to something else that I want to talk about, which is, and we brought it up earlier, some of the lies or misconceptions that we've been told throughout our early life about this is what you're supposed to do to save money, and how some of those things don't apply anymore. It used to be, save 10% of your income, and if you can do that, you're going to be golden when it's time to retire. But we were talking earlier that that's not even the case anymore. Or you have to buy a house, because if you don't buy a house, you're just throwing your money away on rent, and that means you're going to screw yourself over in the future. So let's talk about some of those old mindsets that we had and what's changed. What are some of the biggest ones that have been told to us that don't exist anymore?
Yeah, I had a mentor that always told me, if you could save 10% of your income, you're going to be solid. Just save 10%. And he gave me his story. When I was 18 years old, or actually 15 years old, I worked at McDonald's or Jack in the Box, whatever it was. And, I saved 10% of my income since I was like 15 years old. And now I have all this money, I'm retired or whatever. And there's actually some truth to that. I mean, if you're 15 years old and working and you can start saving 10% of your income and you can maintain that for the rest of your life as your income goes up, actually that can still hold some truth. The reality is that most people don't start saving until they're in their 20s or 30s.
And nowadays it's probably, farther than that, deep into your 30s, just because of the cost of living around here.
Exactly. And so so that has a lot to do with it. The idea of what percentage of your income you should be saving is more tied to what your age is than the actual percentage itself. Okay. So if you're younger, chances are you can get away with saving less percentage of your income, assuming that your income is going to gradually go up as your career advances.
Gotcha. So if you're 20 years old now and you start saving 10% of your income, and now you're 40 and you're making double the money you were at 20, but you're still saving 10% because you've been doing it for 20 years, you can maintain that 10% versus maybe you're 35, you haven't started saving at all, but now you're starting and you make 200K. Okay, now we got to get into the 25 or so percentage. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. So the older we get, the closer we are to what our goal is. And if we're talking about retirement, because the goal could be buying a house, right? When you're 20, we may be 10 years away from buying a house, or 5. If we're 40, we want to buy a house like tomorrow, right? And so depending on how close we are to our goal, if the further out we are, we can get away with saving less money. But if we're closer to that goal than we were before, we need to really increase that. And yeah, it'll be 20, 25, 30%.
Okay, so how about some of the other misconceptions that we've had about saving money, investing, and what's a better option? We talked about housing. Anything else you can think of with that?
One thing that has changed a lot, I think, is this idea that, if I'm living in San Francisco or I want to buy a house in San Francisco, it used to be the case that, yeah, if you buckle down, you save enough money, you're making a decent salary. Maybe you're a manager at a restaurant and you're making $80,000 or something like that. If you're making that kind of money and you buckle down, you save enough, maybe you can afford to buy a house in a year or two. That used to be the case, right? But now housing is so expensive. Interest rates are high. Property taxes are high. Everything is really expensive. Homeowners insurance is expensive. We now have weather conditions that are affecting things, and you really may need to look into earthquake insurance or FEMA. What is it called? A flood insurance or whatever it is. You have all these added expenses that it's becoming increasingly difficult for people to buy a house in the Bay Area. So the reality, one thing that's changed, I think, is that we may need to look outside of the Bay Area. We may need to look outside of California, and it's tough for people to accept because they've built their life here. They've grown up here. This is where their friends are. This is where the family is. And we want to try to make it work one way or the other. I have family who lives in San Jose and they're paying rent close to $3,000 a month, but they're working at Jack in the Box. They're never going to get out of that trap, right? That what do they call it? The rat race. They're never going to get out of that cycle unless one of them becomes a doctor, or hits the jackpot or something like that. And so if we want to get out of that trap, out of that cycle, we have to change the things that we can control, right? So we look at the things that we can't control. We can't control the market. We can't always control how much we make. We have a little bit of control over that. And so if we just focus on the things that we can control, then we'll be better for it. And I think for a lot of people, the reality is we just have to think outside of the Bay Area or outside of California.
I mean, there's some difficult decisions there that people have to make, and I get it's hard. It might mean you have to sell your 2022 BMW M3 because the payments are almost $1,000 a month. And you know what? Maybe I'll have to buy a 2005 used Honda Civic that I can pay with cash, but it's going to be a better gas bill, less maintenance issue. It gets me from point A to point B. Yeah, I lose all the luxuries of having that nice BMW, but if it saves me that $1,000 car payment because I already had enough saved to buy it cash, well, that's money now I can divert to something else. Maybe it means you don't buy the Gucci hats anymore, or you don't go out every night to the fanciest restaurant. Or, I mean, these are some tough choices that people have to make living in the Bay Area because you have to find ways to cut costs. Or maybe it means you still want to live in this house that you rent, but maybe you can sublease it. So now you have a couple people, working together to pay that whole rent, and you're bringing money in that way. Yeah, you sacrifice a little bit of your freedom, a little bit of your autonomy, but the bigger goal is to make sure you can get out of this hole. Then you have to cut back somewhere. Yeah. And it's difficult for people to hear that. And
there's so many different sacrifices you can make. I know I have a really close friend who they wanted to buy a house, but they realized they couldn't buy their dream home. So they decided to maybe pivot. And so instead what they did was they bought a fourplex. They live in one unit and they rent out the other 3. It's not an ideal neighborhood. I think they would much rather live in another place, but they're making this sacrifice. It's a temporary sacrifice where they're, living perhaps in an area where they ideally would not want to live in. This house is not a forever home, but it's giving them the revenue, the cash flow they can then use so that if they save enough over the next 2 to 3 years, they'll then be able to buy the house that they really want, right? So there's bring in another roommate, right? If I was talking to somebody very close to me, their rent in Oakland is really expensive. and they're like, I'm trying to find ways to save money. Bring in a roommate, or why don't you get a roommate in another place? And it's like, I love my independence. I love having my own space. It's like, well, what do you love more, your independence or freedom, like financial freedom? Like, what's more? You have to have this honest conversation with yourself. And again, it's something you can control. You can control, whether or not you have a roommate. So you have to make these difficult decisions.
Yeah, it's something that even for me, I had to, come to terms with. We were talking earlier about a conversation that our mutual friend had, what me and him had, when I was 24 years old, and he was just getting into the space of financial planning and investment, and everything he was telling me, I got it. I know I should save some money. I know I should invest in my future. And you're showing me, when he was showing me the numbers about if you put this much away in 20 years, this is where it could be at, think of what you could do and so forth. And everything he was telling me was correct. But what I was embarrassed to tell him is that, dude, I can barely pay my rent now, or I barely have enough money to buy food. There are some days where I have to, or some weeks I have to live off the credit card because I am not making enough money to support the lifestyle that I have. So for me, the idea at the time of saving anything for retirement just wasn't in the conversation. Like, I'm trying to live right now. And it was through that experience. And of course you hear, mainstream, you're thinking, oh, this person who's 25, they just bought this $2 million house that their parents helped them pay for, that there's other means to it. But like, wow, I'm just trying to keep up with the Joneses. And I had to get out of that mindset for me early on for me, it was late 20s to say, okay, who am I competing with? I'm not competing with anybody. It's about me and what I can do best for myself. So forget what everybody else is doing that I think I'm supposed to live up to. It's how do I get my act together? And I had hit rock bottom financially before I said, well, enough's enough. I have to make some changes. And as the years went on, yeah, it is real. I really had to come to terms with, what are the expenses that are bringing me down? Here's my income. Yes, I want to increase that, which means I might need to get a better job, which means I need more education, which is what I end up getting after my degree. But do I need this expensive car? Can I trade it in for a used one? Which is what I end up having to do is, like in 2010, I bought a 2007 Civic, and that was a 3-year-old car, and I still have it. It's a 16-year-old car. And of course it's all paid for. I have liability insurance. And I'm like, at this point, if it gets in a wreck, it's like, well, it got in a wreck. What am I going to do at that point? I'll have to get a new one. But I've kept that same car for so long because I just needed to get me from point A to point B. I'm not here to impress anybody else. I bought a motorcycle that I used to commute, and I pay for that thing cash, and now it's all done. So I just have liability insurance and that's $100 every 6 months for that insurance payment. So I've learned to find ways where I can cut back and see what's more important to me. And since I don't need the material things anymore, I now have more of an ability, as my salary has gone up, to put more away into investments, to give me that freedom to know that at age 55, 60, whatever it is, I could walk away from my job and I could be totally fine. If I wanted to sit on the beach and drink margaritas all day, which I don't want to do, I could probably do that for 2 days max, but that gives me that freedom. And if whatever else I want to do after that, it doesn't really matter how much it pays me. It's something that I want to do. And I'm not under that financial pressure to have to live a certain way. But then again, my life is unique to me. I don't have kids. I'm not trying to have kids. So I'm in a different game than some of my friends are who they have a couple of kids. In some cases, they're the sole breadwinner for their whole family.
That's rough.
And trying to do it in the Bay Area, you hear the conversations in locker rooms of what's really going down. And it's like, man, you do what you got to do, but it's rough out there. So I can get where a lot of people can be embarrassed to even tell their financial planner, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And I feel like I'm too old to start, that my life is over.
I actually, I had a funny story real quick. So I had a guy who reached out to me on LinkedIn. I'm getting a lot of attraction on LinkedIn. And this gentleman is older. He's in his 50s. He worked for Schwab for many, many years. And he was like the director of communications or something like that. He's worked with thousands of financial advisors. And he said, I've never worked with a financial advisor. I was always too embarrassed to really kind of talk about my own situation. I was young and I was kind of doing stuff on my own. And now I'm at the stage where, I have a little bit of debt. It's kind of embarrassing. And I know all these advisors. So to even go to them and open up and be vulnerable and talk about my situation, I don't want to be judged and be seen as like, because we all have this ego, right? We all have this perception of ourselves and how we view ourselves and how we want other people to view us. And I think Instagram and TikTok is a big contributing factor to that. Not a lot of us post the bad moments in our life, right?
Yeah.
Like, do I post a picture right after my wife and I had an argument? Like, no. We post a picture when we're...
That would be some if you did.
Right? When we post a picture when we're in the zoo and we're smiling with the kids, right? Like, we all do that. And so we have this image of ourselves, and that's okay. And so, yeah, I think it does help to be able to talk to somebody about it, whether it's your spouse, a friend, an advisor if you have one. One of the things I've been thinking about doing is maybe starting some sort of a pro bono, like weekly webinar, seminar sort of thing where I could just open it up for an hour a week and just have anybody log in, come up with questions, and I'm just kind of answering questions on the go, just to be able to give back and help people. Because I'm sure there are a lot of people like that who may want to remain anonymous, may have questions, and they're not really willing to talk to anybody. And I think that would be, and I'm sure that exists, right? I'm sure there's other people who are already doing that.
Let's get this myth out the way for everybody else. Is it bad that you don't own a home and that you rent instead?
No.
It's still out there today. People think if you rent, automatically you're losing money. What they don't see is somebody else may buy a home, but between the mortgage and private mortgage insurance and maintenance and HOA dues, they're paying maybe $6-7 a month to say that they own the house. But then the person who's renting, in some cases, may be renting a very similar place for $3,000 a month. So you're like, wait a minute. He rents it for half of what I pay, but I'm supposed to be in a better spot because I own it, because I'm building equity, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then people don't do the numbers to realize, well, that person who's spending $3,000 a month for renting a very similar place to what you have, assuming that they're taking the difference from what you're spending for your mortgage and whatever and investing it correctly, that in 30 years from now, they could be in a much better financial spot than you are just because you own the home, given the market conditions. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So let me kind of give you a real example without mentioning any names. I'm working with a client that they don't own a house, they rent, but they have kids, they have some debt, and they want to buy a house sooner than later, hopefully. And so the question is it worse to rent or to own? Well, for them, it's actually better to rent right now. Because it's kind of a pickle, right? They have the money to put down money for a down payment, but then they have two kids that are about to start college within a year apart, within the next, call it, year or two, right? And so they're about to have a bunch of expenses. If they go ahead and buy that house, they're not going to be able to pay for the education, right? So for them, what's going to end up making more sense is let's rent for the next 5, maybe 7 years. Let's build up some of these assets. Let's pay down some of this debt so we could qualify for a better loan, and then buy a house down the road, because they wouldn't be able to afford a house right now with where interest rates are. So for some people, it really just depends on their situation, because there could be a lot going on in their life, right? Like with this client, it's not just the question of renting versus buying. There's also other things involved, like paying tuition for somebody's education. Maybe there's medical expenses. Maybe you have a student loan that's $200,000. And so how do I prioritize all of that? Maybe I want to retire when I'm 50, right? So depending on your situation and what your goals are, it really depends. But no, I don't think now long term, it does make more sense to own. Because I've done this millions of times where we're running a forecast for clients. Rent typically doesn't stay the same for 30 years, right? If you're paying $2,000 a month now, it's very likely that in 10 years, you're going to be paying more than $2,000 a month, right? Versus if you own a house, you're going to have a fixed payment, and eventually that payment's going to be gone, assuming you pay off that house, right? And so long-term, it is a lot better to own a house because you'll end up saving money down the road. And of course, there's some tax benefits to owning a property these days, where if you're itemizing your taxes, you can write off some of the liability expenses, some of the mortgage expenses. But it's a case-by-case scenario.
Yeah, because that makes sense if you do the old school way of, I want to buy a house and I want to have kids and we're going to live in the house for 30 years. I'm going to retire and then live my twilight years in the house. And then when we pass on, we can give it to the kids, and then it becomes more of an asset that you can pass on. Versus a lot of people around here treat it as commodities. I want to buy it now because in 2 years it's going to go up by $150,000, and then I'll sell it. I'll take out my investment and I'll go do it again. And, you know, for example, here that there is a condominium over here that somebody bought for like 1.6 million. It's a condominium, two-bedroom condominium. They bought it for 1.6 million a couple years ago, you know, at the height of when everything was going to happen.
Sure.
They wanted to move. They moved. They wanted to sell their condo, and they were telling me, hey, you know, off the record, we know we're not going to get what we want back. We have a number that we bought it at. We have a number that's down here that we're going to have to just suck up and just take it because that's what we need. And they couldn't even get that. So they said, well, we didn't want to do it, but we have to rent it out now because we don't have any other choice. Anything below that low threshold, we would have lost too much money. This is somebody who bought a condo and they had it for 7 years. You'd think if you bought it that it would appreciate something. Even if you just got your money back, it'd be a wash. But when you factor in HOA dues that they were paying the whole time and that they couldn't even get the lower tier, like it ended up being a horrible investment, you know, forecasting for 7 years. So as an example of, okay, it doesn't mean just because you buy it that you're automatically gold. The market could go flip a certain way where, yeah, I thought I was going to have this much and now I'm negative several $100,000. So when I hear that, it's like, if you plan to live in it long term, then it doesn't necessarily matter because you're going to be there for 30 years.
You're going to need a roof over your head.
Yeah. But if you're like, this is good for 5 years or maybe 10 years tops, and I got to get out of here because the neighborhood's changing or because I want to live in a different climate. Well, you are playing that game that you hope it goes up, but it may not. And are you prepared to take a huge loss if you decide to sell it? So I think people don't think about. We just assume that when you buy a home, it's automatically every time you're good to go, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the case, especially around here with the cost of living.
Yeah. And I feel like the cities, I haven't been to San Francisco in a long time, probably since the last time I was here with you. And it's changed so much in just the past year. I mean, there's so much more homeless. It's very different. So I can understand why there could be a lot of people moving out of the city.
Yeah, there's something I want to show you. Hold on again while I pull it up. Okay, so like this is a demographics map of the United States, and it shows you, and this is something I'll put up for all of our viewers so they can see a visual of what this is, and I'll link up where it came from. But you can see this was done in 2020 for the United States. And so the people who were born, let's say in 1950, this is how many females are left. This is how many males are left approximately. So our parents' generation is probably in the age of 60 to 80 right now from the millennials generation. So you can see from 1960s on, there's, you know, the numbers are starting to go down because as we naturally age, whatever. Right. And then you go down to Generation X, who was born probably in the 70s, late 60s to early 80s here. And you see how the numbers, people who this should be higher because they're younger, but you see how the numbers trend down. And then you get to our generation, the millennials, late 80s, early 90s. And this is when everybody was having kids. So our parents who were here, Generation X was just kind of got screwed over. And then Generation Y, or the millennials, we just took a big bump here. So look at all the people that we have for our generation. And when our parents bought a home back in the day, they bought the home thinking, you know, I'm going to spend $100,000 for a house. By the time I retire, it might be $250,000. It's good enough money for me to give to my kids. And then what happened around here is that the technology era just skyrocketed here. Facebook, Google, everything came to the Bay Area. And if you're not from the Bay Area, it's good to know there's just not a lot of places to build around here. There's only so much land. And because everybody came here for the jobs, that land just shot up in value. So all these people from our parents' generations all of a sudden seem to become millionaires. That house they bought for $100,000 is now $2 million in certain places. Wow. And they see that like, wow, this is a moneymaker. So seeing that for our generation here makes us think, wow, I have to buy a house because look at how much my parents made on that house. That $100,000 investment 20 years ago is now worth $2 million. Are you kidding me? Of course you have to buy a house. But then people like me come along and we say it's getting too expensive to have kids, at least for right now, maybe for all of us forever. And now look at the numbers for the Generation Z, the people who are like 15, 20 years old now.
It's a lot less.
Look at that. It has shrunk a lot. So now we're in this position where the people who are our age, the millennials, when we want to become, 30, 40 years from now, you want to sell their house, you start looking at this and you're like, well, who's going to buy the house? Because we were the big boom from our parents' generation, which explains why the demand was so much because there was so few houses. So now when we go back 30 or 40 years in the future, is there going to be a demand for our investments? Is it going to skyrocket the way that houses did for our parents? But in reality, there's just less people to buy. There was what, 10.5 to 11 million females in the United States alone, and from who were born in the 1990s. And now we're down to about, I'd say 8.5 million, 3 million for females, and about another 2 or 3 million for men. That's 6 million people less that we have out there. And it's just going to keep getting worse. And just as an example, you can see how Europe's suffering. Japan is horrible.
Oh yeah, Japan.
We've known about that for a while.
Yeah, actually, just saw a story of somebody who was born in like the very first child that was born in, I don't know how long ago. But no, yeah, this is real data, right? And what do you think about that?
To me, that tells me, I need to make sure that I put my money away in an area that maybe is different than my parents did. For our parents, it was all about the home, real estate, because everybody knew you just had to buy real estate. We have investment accounts here in this country that they don't have access to in other parts of the world. In many places in the world, we have a house, and when we get too old, our kids will take care of us, and we'll pass the house to them, and we'll take care of their grandkids, and the cycle repeats itself.
It's like built into the culture.
Yes, that's your retirement system. There is no 401k, Social Security. You depend on your kids to take care of you. But as we urbanize more, kids have become less of a priority because they seem to be more expensive. Whereas if you're an urban area, you need more kids to help around with the farm, with everything else. So, and China has seen the same thing too. And their numbers are horrible. And then this is assuming that they're telling the truth,
right?
Is that things have become so expensive in mainland China. And with that one child policy from way back in the when, they sort of shot themselves in the foot. So nobody's having kids now. So in 20 years, everybody thinks China's going to be this great power. Actually, the numbers are showing that they are pretty much going to get screwed, because they had all this time when they were having kids back when they were more rural, or when they were more rural. They're not doing it now because everybody sort of got rich overnight, and it got too expensive to have them. So they're seeing the same thing. South Korea is seeing the same thing. Japan, we all know about that. As things get more expensive, it just becomes harder to have children. Mm-hmm. But for us in our country, the more that we do this, the more there's men and women out there working, it builds the economy up. But the trade-off is it makes everything more expensive. So we're less inclined to want to have children because we see the bills. We see, how much is it going to cost me? How much do I have to work? Do I want to stay at that job forever? And these are real conversations. And again, this is data that most people don't know about, and most people don't think about long term. But I'm curious, from your point of view, as a financial planner, what do you think about that, and how do you factor that into your future planning, seeing things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I've never actually seen that data before, and it's really interesting to see the decline in just people being born, people having kids, right? But it makes sense. More women are becoming more educated than in the past. They're attaining higher degrees. They're attaining more successful careers. Now it's a common thing to say, I'm a stay-at-home dad, versus it used to be more of like, if you're having kids, it's generally speaking, the wife is going to stay home and she's going to be a housewife. And now, I mean, I have a couple of friends who they're stay-at-home dads, and it works out great. Where I kind of look at things is, look, I think it goes back to intentions, right? What are the expectations and the intentions that are going into this real estate investment? Am I buying this property because I'm expecting to see what happened 20, 30 years ago, and that this property is now going to, like, this $1 million property is going to be worth $5 million, $10 million down the road? Or am I buying it because this is where I want to live? This is where I want to raise my kids, right?
The way I think it should be, you should be buying a home, in my opinion, because you want to raise a family. So therefore, the equity you make is a result of you providing a home for kids. But with these housing prices, when they went crazy a couple of decades ago, it just turned into a moneymaker. Forget buying, it sort of priced out the people who wanted to buy homes for that reason.
Right.
They wanted to have a family. They're like, I can't even do that because money from overseas is buying up all these condos that sit empty for 2 years because they just want to keep their money safe, which drives the price up, which means everyday people can't afford it. And same thing with single family homes. As everybody went to go work from home, it's, well, I don't need a condo anymore in the city. I need a house in Walnut Creek or San Ramon. And there's less to build out there, so it jacks the prices up even more. And now average Joe can't even afford that. So what do? Either I stay here and don't have kids, or I have a family and I move to Boise or something like that. And
the investors are getting hurt just as much, right? It's both. If you're looking at buying a house to start a family, you're being affected because now you're having to pay a bigger sticker price for that. But even if you're trying to get into the real estate investment industry, and buy property to rent out or to flip, or I'm actually not seeing a ton of flipping these days, but
Yeah, that went out the window after '08.
it still happens, but I see a lot of it more outside of California. But that's my point is there's a lot of investors and even homeowners who are looking outside of California because, yeah, maybe I'm collecting less rent, but I'm seeing a bigger profit because I could spend less money for a house, have a smaller mortgage, therefore get more of the rent collected. So my net income is a lot larger than it would be here in California, right? If I buy $1 million property in California and I'm an average Joe just getting started, and I don't have $500,000 to put down, I'm going to have to put down anywhere between, 5 to 20% as a down payment. And even then, there's only so much I could charge in rent, right? I can't just go in there and charge $10,000 a month, right? $1 million property, maybe I could get away charging $3,000, $4,000 a month, right? But then you collect that $48,000 a year, you subtract the mortgage, you might be at a net zero, right? So, that's kind of where I'm kind of looking at it more is what's the purpose? What's the intention? Are we buying this with the right intention in mind? Like I had a client who bought a property in Brentwood because it was a great discount. It was a great deal, they said. We talked about it, and my recommendation was don't buy it because the numbers just don't make sense. Now, they were right. The house was discounted. I think it had dropped like about $50,000 in price. And so they said, this is a good deal. We should buy it, and then we could rent it out. They're right. It is a good deal. But what wasn't a good deal was when we ran the numbers, they were actually negative in the cash flow. They were still having to pay more money because the rent wasn't enough to collect to cover all of their expenses. And so now they're in the situation where the wife ended up losing a job. So, so now they're dealing with that and the loss of income from the property or the, being negative cash flow on the property. So now they're thinking about maybe selling it at a loss because the property's actually gone further down in value, right? So you got to make sure you're buying the real estate for the right reasons. If you're buying it for cash flow, look at the cash flow. Does the cash flow make sense? Am I making enough money from this realistically? If I'm buying it for the value, right? What assumption am I using? Am I expecting this to go up at a 10% rate of return per year? Or am I doing a more conservative, maybe 3 to 5 or 6% rate of return per year? Just, having the right expectations and planning it out, I think is important.
That's awesome, man. I think this is a good time to get into some questions that we have here for everybody. So what are your thoughts on the idea of the market, how scary it is, and what the average person should interpret with what they see on the news?
Yeah. So, the stock market is very much like a roller coaster. There's going to be ups and downs. And it's not as scary, especially when you compare it to real estate, because that's usually the comparison, right?
Yeah.
People always think about the stock market versus the real estate. Which one's better? And the idea is, and the reality is that, both are great. You shouldn't just do one, right? You should diversify your investment. But it's similar and different in a lot of ways. Where it's similar is that the real estate is also like a roller coaster, except that roller coaster is very, very slow. So think about going to a theme park and getting on a roller coaster that goes 2 miles per hour. That's kind of like real estate, right? The price value doesn't change on a day-to-day basis. It does, but we don't necessarily see it, right? Like for my house, I get a monthly report that tells me what the price of my house is, and I could look back over the last couple of months, and I could see that the price has actually gone up and down slightly, but not significantly, right? The change in value is marginal, but I can see that there is a change in value over time. But that change happens very slowly. Those reports are usually printed out. I don't know if it's on a weekly or monthly or quarterly basis, depending if you're looking at county reports or neighborhood reports, whatever. But the stock market, that's imagine going to a roller coaster and you're traveling at 100 miles an hour as opposed to 2 miles an hour, right? That price change is happening second by second. But it's exactly the same picture. When you zoom out of real estate, if you zoom out and look at real estate values over the last 50 years, we can see volatility. We can see kind of like a roller coaster, up and down movement. We can see the same thing in the stock market if we just zoom out 1 year, right? We don't have to zoom out 50 years to see that volatility. We could just look at the last year and see that there's volatility. But it's basically the same thing. So the whole idea is, if I buy a real estate property for $100,000, right?
Yeah, we're at Alabama.
If I buy for 100,000 and that property goes down to 90,000, am I going to sell it? No, probably not. I'm going to hold on to it because it's going to come back up, right? Maybe I'm still collecting income from it, whatever. Maybe I'm living in it still, so I'm not too concerned about it. Then that house goes up over time. Well, it's the same thing with the stock market, right? If I buy a stock and the stock is worth $200 a share, and then it drops down to $180 a share, am I going to sell it? Well, you should use the same principles as the real estate. If you're selling it at 180, well, now you've literally lost money.
Yeah.
Right. But if you hold on to it with the idea that maybe the stock will go back up in value, then hold on to it and then sell it at a higher price. Right. So the stock market isn't as scary, especially once we start to kind of look at it from a different perspective. And if you are the kind of person who's always comparing stock market versus real estate, I always like to use this example because they're both very similar. They're just different in terms of the pace that they're going at.
Yeah. And from what it was told to me, and I'm pretty sure that this advice still holds true, is unless you're retiring tomorrow or in the very, very near future, then really don't pay attention to where your stocks are at, up or down. If you're getting ready to retire in the next couple months, and this happens to be 2007 when everything crashed, maybe you got something to worry about. But if you still got 20 years or 30 years before that day even comes, well, it's going to go up and down. And don't freak out that all the money you put in this whole year is gone compared to, let's say, January 1st, because it's going to bounce back overall long term. It happens in the economy all the time. Things go up and then they go down. The pendulum goes right, the pendulum goes left. Money was free or cheap in the pandemic, and now interest rates are 8-9%. But then again, interest rates were about 20% in the 80s. But all of us who were born now, or most of us who were born younger than us, never saw those days. So they can't compare. They just say, oh my God, interest rates are 9%. Like, yeah, they've been worse before we were born. So I think it's just something to tell the people that, hey, keep in mind the bigger picture, the perspective of things.
But I do think people should pay attention to it somewhat. I mean, maybe not on a day-to-day basis, but it kind of depends on the concentration of their investment portfolio. If you're somebody out there who's investing in like 3 different stocks, you might want to be looking at those more often than not. Maybe not every day, but at least paying attention to it on a weekly or monthly basis, because you do want to know, okay, is this company, especially if it's a small company, right? If you're investing in like UPS, UPS isn't going around anywhere anytime soon. But if you're investing in a smaller company that's only been around for a couple of years, it's somewhat speculative. You want to be paying attention to it, reading articles, what's happening with the board, what's happening with the CEO, what are the decisions that this company's making, what's their sort of 5-year plan, whatever. Now, on the other hand, if you have 200 different stocks, then maybe you don't have to pay attention to it as much because you're pretty well diversified. And so for most people that have 401ks or 457s or 403bs through their employer, they're most often going to be invested in something like a mutual fund or an exchange traded fund, which those by themselves are so diversified that it does give you that ability to kind of set it and forget it to an extent, right? Where you don't have to pay attention to it even on a monthly basis. You could really look at it once a year and say, all right, do we need to make any changes?
Right.
But if you are invested in individual stocks and that's kind of your thing and you want to be doing that, it does require a little bit more management.
Yeah, that's so dangerous. When that Robinhood app came out, everybody wanted to be a day trader. It's like, of course, all the people who have the money were like, hey, these idiots, what are they doing? But really, it's like people think they're going to get rich quick, or you're going to dump all your money in Tesla.
Some people did, yeah.
Some people did. If you played it, but it's like going to Vegas.
Right.
Yeah. That happened to me the last time I went to go to a Raider game. I took my buddies to the Cosmopolitan, and we went to a roulette table, and they didn't know how to play roulette. I'm like, oh, it's simple. You just put money on whatever number. As an example, I'm like, so I'm going to put money, but $20 on number 24, but 24 is black. So I'm going to put another 25 on the black. So in theory, if 24 wins, I get paid 36-1, but it's also black. So I'm going to get paid double for that one. Yeah. And then it's also in this column too. So I'm going to put $20 here. I put it on there just to show them what's going to happen. and then 24 black hits. And I'm like, oh shit. Like, I just won like $2,000, whatever. And it was literally just off the whim, like, hey, this is what happens if you win. I expected maybe to get one of them. And I hit all three. And I'm like, yeah, this doesn't happen. The guys are sitting at the table like, what the hell? I've been sitting here for an hour losing everything, and you show up and you hit one number that hits 3 times. And yeah, sometimes you can get lucky, but it is like gambling. But
And then to that, what I would say is the number one piece of advice, if you're listening to this still after all this time, if you can walk away with anything, this is it. Whatever you're investing in, make sure you have a game plan, an exit strategy. What's the exit strategy? I gave that advice to a friend of mine, I don't know, like 7 years ago, and he still reminds me to this day. He's actually one of our fraternity brothers. And he says, man, you told me that a long time ago, and I've kept that. And you're right. You got to have an exit strategy. So what I mean by that is, if you're buying real estate, if you're buying a car, if you're buying stocks, if you're buying whatever it is, have an exit strategy. In your head, you should kind of have an expectation of, I'm buying this stock, I'm buying this property, what needs to happen in order for me to sell this? And until that happens, I'm not going to sell it. And so what are the conditions that need to surround that? If you go into that with that strategy, you're going to be so much further ahead, because you avoid the emotional reactions of making decisions, and you're making a decision based off of a preemptive plan that you set in motion when you originally made that investment. So a good example is this. Nvidia went up like over 200% this year, right? It's done very well. Now, if somebody would have bought that in the beginning of the year, nobody knew the stock was going to go up that much, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there was some, but so for example, if I would have bought that stock and said, all right, I'm going to buy this at, let's say, $200 a share. If this goes, like, maybe my strategy is, if this gets to, like, I think this can get to $300 a share. As soon as it does that, I'm going to sell. I don't care if it keeps going further. I don't care, whatever. And then let's say that does happen, and it did. It did get to $300 a share. Now it's over $400. And so instead of you kicking yourself in the butt and thinking, God, I sold at 300. It's worth over 400 now. Like, I could have been doing something. I could have had more money. You should still feel proud because you sold at a high. You stuck to your conviction. And plus, when you sold at 300, you didn't know that it was going to go up to 4 something. It could have very well gone back down, right? So you got to have that game plan. And so when you do that, you can sell with that confidence of knowing, I have this plan. And it's not like you're just selling it and then spending it on, some meticulous thing. No, you sell it and reinvest it into something else that can potentially appreciate in value too. So you're not just selling it and then losing the money. Yeah. You're selling it and investing it into something else that can potentially go up. So rule number 1 is, if you're investing in anything, have an exit strategy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good advice on that one. But now this is the part of the episode where we're going to get into some questions, because I still have a lot from people who are asking about financial advice. Financial advice meaning, what is this whole thing about? Because it is scary for a lot of people to think about numbers. They don't know. I don't want to look. I don't want. It's better if I don't know. It's like being afraid to go to the doctor. It's like, I'd rather not go because they're going to find something wrong. It's going to cost me this much. They just don't go.
Bury the head in the sand.
Yeah, pretty much. So let's go through some of these things. What hasn't? Here's one. What is the difference between investment versus savings, and should I do both?
So investing versus savings. Savings can be seen as really saving money for short-term expenses, right? So the way I look at saving and investing is the time horizon. Generally speaking, anything under 3 years, I'm going to consider that savings. Why? Let's say if I was planning to buy a house in 2 years, I'm probably not going to invest my money into anything, because if that loses value in a year, let's say I invest money and then 12 months later, that investment loses 50%. Well, I needed that house to buy a house in 2 years, and now I've just lost 50%. So if you have a goal, whatever that is, and that goal of when you need that money falls in roughly 3 years, I'm most likely going to recommend somebody to keep that money in savings, or save that into a savings account, whether that's a high yield savings or things like that. If the goal or the milestone or whatever it is that they need the money for falls in after 3 years, then I would consider that more of an investment. The further out that goal is, the more aggressive I might get with that investment. So what I mean by that is, if the goal is maybe 5 years out, I might not put all my money in just stocks, right? I might put some money in stocks, some money in cash, some money in bonds, maybe something in some real estate funds that are a little bit more conservative, right? So I try to stay a little bit more conservative, but still have some growth component to that. So like stocks.
Got it.
And then the further out, so if I'm 30 years away from something, then yeah, let's take some risk. All right, let's diversify this out a little bit in the different types of things that can generate more growth.
Okay. And so for savings, is that just putting money under the mattress? Is that your savings account at your local branch of your bank? Does it include CDs, money market accounts, these things that most people don't even know about? Are all those considered savings, or those get into the investment category?
Yeah. So anything that has the word guaranteed or protection would be considered a savings. So CDs are generally protected. Savings accounts are FDIC insured. Interest rates are generally not guaranteed, but for the most part, you're guaranteed not to lose any money, right?
Gotcha. And those aren't tax deductible, right? If you get a CD or a money market, it just, okay, we guarantee you this if you put in for 5 years, but it doesn't help you on your taxes necessarily.
Correct. Yeah. And to call something an IRA or a Roth IRA or 401k, those things alone are not investments. That's just a vehicle, right? The investment or the savings is whatever, because you could have cash inside of an IRA or stocks. Right. So the investment itself is what is going into those vehicles, the vehicle being the IRA or the 401k.
Gotcha. Okay. Here's another one. And we talked about this earlier involving children. Two parts to this. One is, what is the best way to pass on funds onto your children? And what is the best way for you to help your parents leave a legacy for you and their grandchildren / your children? If that question makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So the first thing that comes to mind is estate planning. God, I can't tell you how many people don't have a will, don't have a trust.
Yeah, I don't have one.
You got to have one, man. I mean, most people think, well, I don't have kids. I don't own a house, so I don't really need that. Well, let me tell you this. If something happened to you and you became, I don't know, unconscious, or you were in a coma or something like that.
I got hit by a bus. Whatever.
Yeah. Who's going to make those life decisions for you? Who's going to decide to either pull the plug or keep you alive? Would you want your spouse to decide that? Would you want your sister to decide that? Your family? If you're not married, I don't even know if the person you're dating can decide that for you. I think it would have to be family.
Yeah.
And would you want your family to decide that? Right. And so,
like, I always hated him.
So, having those things done, I think, are important. Especially for transferring assets, right? When you have an estate plan or a trust, oftentimes that trust will own all of your assets. They're going to own your real estate. They're going to own your investments. So when you die, you're not saying, okay, I'm leaving it to this specific person. I'm leaving it to the trust. And then the trustee, who's basically the manager of the trust, who you decided before you died, if I die, who's going to be in charge of managing the estate? And it could be a brother or somebody that you trust. And so then that person is going to read the trust and say, all right, this person said they were going to split the assets between the kids evenly or whatever. And so now we have to follow the trust. It just makes things so much more easier.
Really fast. Is there a contingency if the trustee is also, you're both in the same plane?
Yeah, there is. So there should be anyways. If the attorney did a good job drafting the trust, there should be a successor trustee.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So anyway, continuing on.
Yeah, and so you want to have a trust because, especially if you have kids, the big example I give my clients is, here, I'll be sitting across from them and saying, hey, if you passed away, who would you want to have your kids go to? Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be the guardian of your children? And they'll kind of look at each other, and sometimes they'll have two different responses, right? The husband might say, well, I want my parents. And then the wife might say, well, I don't want your parents to be, I want my sister to watch them, And so ultimately, if there's no guardianship stated, when they die, the court is going to have to decide who the kids go to, at least in California. And so do we want to rely on the court to decide who our kids are going to go to? Maybe not. Maybe we want to make those decisions ourselves. And so that's part of having a trust. So there's a lot of different components to a trust. It's not just about transferring assets, but it does make things a hell of a lot easier to transfer assets. It also helps save the money. It also helps the family save a lot of money, because when you die without having a trust, a lot of those assets will go through probate. It could take months, maybe a year. If the family is fighting about the house or whatever, it could take a very long time before the court decides how they're going to split assets up. So if you have a trust set up ahead of time, we skip the probate and everything gets dismantled or handled exactly as it's laid out in the trust.
Got it. So if you're concerned about, you have 3 or 4 kids and you're concerned about what the best way is to do it, get a lawyer who specializes in this, get a trust. That way it's all taken care of for you. You work with that lawyer to figure out who's the trustee of it and how they wanted to diversify it, so nobody's fighting each other at the end when you're already gone and they're trying to say who gets what. I get the house, you get the cars, whatever. Okay. And then how about the other way around? Helping your parents leave a legacy for you and you and your grandkid, their grandkids.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of times I'm working with clients who, I'm always asking about, again, when I'm working with people, I'm digging deep and wide. I want to know everything there is to know about their finances. So I get to know their family dynamics and everything. One of the questions I ask is, tell me about your parents. Tell me about their finances, if they know anything of it. And sometimes I will ask for them to involve their parents into the planning conversation, because if there's anything that I can do to help the parents improve their situation, in other words, have them continue living the lifestyle that they're living with the assets that they have, but maybe position those assets in such a way where they can maybe either grow more, or when they pass away, there's more money left behind for their kids. That could be something worth discussing. And so I always suggest or encourage people to talk to their parents to see if they'd be open to the conversation about, hey, would you mind having this conversation with my advisor? And just having him get a second look at your portfolio and seeing if there's anything that could be done to make sure. And then there's some things that could be as simple as just getting a life insurance policy on the grandparents if they're eligible. There's other things that we could do to the investments where instead of, they might be invested in 100% bonds, which, are safe, but they don't pay a lot of income. Right. So if we can generate more cash flow from their investments, say if we can generate more, if we can increase their yield from say 4% to maybe 10%, well, now they're still living off of the same income, but now we're adding money to the principal, therefore leaving more money behind to the kids. Does that make sense?
I gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So for those who have concerns about helping their parents leave it. Okay, great. What are the top 3 things that your clients come to you for that you wish everybody knew? Things that are simple, but the majority of people, probably it's foreign to them.
So the first one I would say is starting as soon as possible. Right, is don't delay. If you're listening to this, or if you've been thinking about, maybe paying off some debt first and then starting to save or invest money later, the sooner we can start saving money. And I feel like this is something that everybody should know, but sometimes I feel like I have to drill it into people's heads. Some of my family members is, it doesn't matter how much you can save right now. If you're young, if you're broke, if you have a lot of debt, whatever it is, put $20 a week or a month, $50, whatever it is, open an investment account and start investing into something as little as you can, because you want to allow for compound interest to do its magic. The sooner we can start getting money into these investment accounts, the sooner those dollars can start compounding over time, right? So if we start later, we're going to have to save a lot more money down the road. But if we start sooner, we could save ourselves more money down the road if we can start saving with that lower amount today, if that makes any sense. So start now, start saving now, however old you are. If you have a 401k plan, this is a no-brainer. I've talked to a lot of people who are like, where do I get started? Do you have a 401k plan? Yeah, do that. It's almost thoughtless, right? It's already provided by your employer. All you have to do is enroll. It comes out directly from your payroll. So you don't even have to think about transferring money from your account to the investment company. Mm-hmm. It's literally coming from your payroll, right? So that's the easiest thing anybody could do is if you're not enrolled in your company's retirement plan, do that. And if you think that that's not a good idea, We can talk about that offline, but there's a lot of reasons why you should be doing that. The second one is kind of the same thing we talked about in the beginning, which is, again, most people don't really know this, but you got to save first and spend later. So what I mean by that is getting ourselves and changing our mindset from spending first, which means, I get my money, I get my paycheck, I pay my bills, and I wait till the end of the month to see if I can save anything at the end of the month. Instead of approaching it that way, we should really approach things as, okay, here's what my list of expenses are. Here's what I want to buy next month. Here's what I want to budget for. And so maybe I make $4,000 a month. My fixed expenses, rent and utilities and everything, maybe that's $3,500. And, I'm going to give myself $200 to splurge on maybe a new technology thing, whatever that I need, accessory. So I have a couple $100 left over that I'm going to save. So that extra couple $100, instead of waiting until the end of the month, I'm going to save that in the beginning of the month, right? I'm going to set that aside. So it's having this mentality of save first and then spend later. So you're really only spending whatever money is left over as opposed to saving whatever's left over.
Got it. Okay.
So that's a different mindset, kind of a framework, a shift. And then the third one really applies to business owners. I don't know why this isn't an obvious one, but if you're a business owner, you gotta have yourself some kind of a retirement plan, SEP IRA, 401k, something, because you are missing out on some major tax deductions. Set aside saving for retirement. If you're complaining about taxes, having a 401k plan or a SEP IRA is the easiest way for you to lower your income tax liability. So that's a no-brainer. In fact, most of the time when I'm working with a business owner, if I don't see that, that's my number one recommendation. And I'll be able to identify that within 15 minutes of our conversation, usually. And I'll say, hey, and by the way, if you do that, you're going to be able to save yourself approximately this much money in taxes. Is it worth it? Yeah, I think so. All right, well, let's set that up, right? So yeah, those are probably the three most, I think, common things that people should know about and probably don't.
Gotcha. And I guarantee you a lot of business owners around here probably don't even know what a SEP IRA is. They're making it happen. And then, okay, I have some income for myself. And then the savings thing is kind of sort of off track here, which leads me to the last question I have from somebody. They are 30 years old, 30 to 35 years old. They have student debt, which a lot of people do nowadays. They have a good job, so I'm going to say maybe $100,000 a year, but they cannot afford to save much. Is it better to save a little, maybe a couple $100 a month, or take as much money as they can and pay off that debt first? What would you, and again, everybody's different, but what's the philosophy you want people to think about when they're in this situation where they see these debt numbers, but they also want to save and time's not on their side?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different ways I would approach that. And yeah, there's the case, it's case by case. And I'd probably have to know a little bit more information on exactly what to do. But generally speaking, some of the things I would consider is this: potentially explore debt consolidation. If it makes sense, for example, if it's credit card debt, chances are they're paying anywhere from 16% to 30% in interest, right? And so if it makes sense for them to consolidate everything where they could get things down to one loan that's maybe at a 10% interest rate or even lower, it might make some sense. Okay. So that's one place I would start. The other place is, I would say, what are the total minimum expense? Like if it's multiple loans, if it's multiple debts that they owe, most people that I talk to about debt management, when I'm initially having these conversations, I'm finding out that they're paying more than the minimum on all of their different debts. Credit cards, student loans, multiple student loans or whatever. And that's a terrible way of going about it because it's going to take a lot longer for them to pay it off.
But they're paying more than their minimum payment, and it's going to take them longer to pay it off? How's that work?
I know, it sounds counterintuitive.
Yeah.
So what I would recommend is, generally speaking, I would choose, again, it changes depending on the account balances and all that. But for most of the time, I would pick the debt that has the highest interest rate, and I would focus on paying that one off first. So first, I would do a budget and figure out, okay, here's my income, here's all my expenses. Let's set aside all the debt and the payments for that debt. Maybe I would include the minimum payments for that into my budget. So this is what my budget is. I'm making $10,000 a month, and my expenses are $9,000 a month, including the minimum payments on all of these debts.
Including contributions to your pre-tax?
Sure. Why not?
Include that? Okay.
Yeah, sure. So we have $1,000 left over in this example, right? Now, what I would say is I would choose the debt with the highest interest rate first. And I would, again, maybe not apply all $1,000 because of their age and they need to save for retirement. We would maybe want to carve out some money to go to some investments or some savings, especially if they don't have an emergency fund. Mm-hmm. Remind me to come back to the emergency fund.
Emergency fund.
But let's just assume that the main priority for them is to pay off their debt. Well, if they have $1,000 left over, I would then pick the debt with the highest interest rate and apply $1,000 that's left over from their budget to that highest interest rate debt. Everything else, I'd pay the minimum payment. And I know it sounds counterintuitive because you're like, wait a minute, I'm paying the minimum. My debt's probably not being paid off, or if anything, I'm maybe increasing my debt. But you're paying off this one debt that has a really high interest rate much, much, much faster because you're applying so much more money into it. So what you end up doing is you're creating the snowball effect, because once that debt is paid off, we can then transfer that $1,000 plus the minimum payment that was going to that card. Let's say the minimum payment was $500. So now you have $1,500 a month that's going to roll over to the next debt with the highest rate. Mm-hmm. And now you're paying $1,500 a month plus whatever that minimum payment is.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so as you keep doing that, you're now applying a larger and larger and larger payment into the next debt. And it becomes like this larger snowball of payment. Trust me, when you do the math, you end up paying things off a lot faster than if you just pay more to each account.
Yeah, there was two ways that I've heard about it. Is one is find the one that has the highest interest rate and pay that one off first. Doesn't necessarily mean it has the highest balance, but pay that one off first. And another philosophy might be, well, pay one of your accounts off first, even if it's a lower balance, because the idea is it's a psychological win that I paid off one card. I feel good. Maybe it wasn't the smartest one to do because of finances. I maybe paid a little bit more in interest by keeping the other one up, but psychologically I see a win. And that's more important to some people than, okay, if I do the numbers, I should pay minimums here, pay this one off first, but I still have, let's say 4 accounts. So I still see 4 balances. Versus the other way. So in some cases, might it be better to go with the psychological one? Say, hey, pay that one off first because I know it's going to make you feel better.
Yeah, well, it might even make financial sense too. I mean, if you think about it, if you're able to pay $1,000 a month into the debt, and you have a credit card balance of $1,500, just pay that off. Pay that off in the next month or two, and then focus on the rest. Right? Why keep that? Why wait until the end? Like if that $1,500 was the lowest interest rate, I'm not going to wait 4 years to pay that one off. Let's just pay that off now, and then we can worry about the next one.
Okay, gotcha. So even for people who have, let's say, 6 figures worth of student debt, which I'm not sure what the average interest rate on student debt is. I'm guessing it's on the lower side, but I don't know. They just see that number and say, I owe $200,000 to law school. I'm never going to get out of that hole. And then they start getting in their own head about what they should do. But even if you have that, it's still pay X amount, but we want to also take a part of that and put it into a savings and investment account rather than taking everything and putting it all into the debt first.
It depends. Yeah. Like for example, if we can get away with paying off the debt in say 3 years and we're young, maybe we're in our late 20s or 30s, maybe we can wait 3 years to just focus on paying off the debt. We'll feel good about it. We don't have that debt carrying in our backs. And then we can then start focus on building from there. Right. On the other hand, if we're in that same age and we have all this debt, we have absolutely no savings. Right. I mentioned I was going to come back to this emergency
fund. Right.
Yeah. One of the reasons why people stay in debt is because they don't have anything to fall back onto. Right. Perfect example is this pro bono client that I was working with. What they were doing is they pay down their credit card just enough. An emergency would happen. They'd use a credit card and it'd go back up. And they're constantly in the cycle of just having these maxed out credit cards because they can never pay it off. Like, why can't they pay it off? Because every time there's an emergency, they don't have an emergency fund. They don't have any savings. And so they're constantly relying on debt to get themselves out of a hole. But they're digging themselves deeper and deeper into this hole, right? And so For those kinds of people, if you don't have an emergency fund or some cash to fall back on in case your tire pops and you need to buy a new one, or the car breaks down, or you need to replace the toilet in your house or whatever, I'd be focusing on that, on both of those things. So in that other example that I was talking about, where the person can save $1,000 a month, maybe instead of applying all of that to the debt, and again, it's going to be different for every person, but maybe do half to the debt and then half to the savings account, or maybe do 80%, maybe do $800 into the savings account and then $200 to the debt. It just depends on where you're at, how quickly we can build, what an emergency fund amount is right for you. Like if we're trying to, like if your monthly expenses are $30,000 a month, it's going to take us a while to build that emergency fund. If you only need maybe $5,000 as an emergency fund, we could do that relatively quicker.
And then, so an emergency fund is based on just your minimum expenses. Does that include your gas, how much you spend on groceries? I don't know. Is that how you're figuring that out? Or as people say, $10,000 seems like a good amount. And
I mean, at this point, it's whatever number you feel comfortable with. I mean, the way I define an emergency fund, it covers at least 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. But you may define it as, what's a number in your mind that you would feel like if you saw that in your savings account, you'd be like, whew, okay, I feel good. Like if something goes wrong, because we all have something we're worried about going wrong, right? Oh, yeah. Like if we have a used car, we're worried about the car breaking down. And so we kind of know like how much it's going to cost to repair it. Like maybe it's going to cost us like $4,000 to repair the car, right? So in your mind, how much money do you need to see in that savings account for you to feel like you can breathe? And if that number is 2,000 or 10,000, let's just start with that.
Got it. So I'll ask one final question that's on my mind. If you were to prioritize in this order, what is more important? Pre-tax savings like 401k, 457b, paying off debt, emergency savings account, and then let's just say CDs and T-bills and whatnot. How would you prioritize? If I'm the average person, this is what I should go out for first. Or put it this way, should I focus on maximizing my pre-tax before I think about building up this big lower interest savings account?
The way I would start is to take out a piece of paper and write down things that are the most important things to you in no order of priority. So what are the different goals that you have? You want to retire, you want to start a business, you want to buy a house, you want to get out of debt, all these different things. Write that list and then prioritize them. And so depending on the order of that priority will dictate how you're going to prioritize those different things, right? Getting out of debt, saving into a pre-tax account. So I would say if the priority is more about building wealth for the future, I would prioritize potentially more into saving things for retirement. So pre-tax account would be an example. If the debt is causing an insurmountable amount of stress and we're thinking about that on a daily basis, that debt is affecting our ability to sleep, right? It's affecting our ability to save for retirement and all these other things that maybe are important, but maybe not as important. And that paying off the debt is a little higher, then I'd really focus on maybe paying off that debt as well. And it also depends on if we are saving and investing, what are those savings and investments doing, right? If I'm saving money into an account that's paying me 0.015%, I'd say just pay off the debt, right? Because you're not really earning that much interest in the savings account. But if you can find a high yield savings account that's paying you 5%, and maybe the student loan that you have is 4%, hey, it's not a bad idea to maybe put some more money into the savings account because there's an arbitrage there, right? You're up 1% in the savings account because you're earning 5% versus the 4% on the debt. So it really does depend on the person. But how I would go about it, like if I was working with a client, I would say, well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about your goals. What are all of them? And let's prioritize them. Which ones are the most important? And then from there, I would also maybe take it one step further and then also talk about what's my overall vision, right? And this one's a little hard to do on your own unless you're working with a professional, but what's my vision for the future? What kind of life do I want to live? What am I envisioning when I'm older? And then you have to kind of backtrack from that. What needs to happen if it's 10 years down the road, what needs to happen in all of those years following up to it in order for you to get there? That'll really dictate it. It's tough for someone to kind of do that on their own, but
Yeah.
that's kind of how I would approach it.
I gotcha. And a final thought for you, just your impression. Do you see more people who kind of don't care about the debt anymore? They're like, whatever, I have debt. It's a lot of student loan debt. Probably never paid off, but as long as I'm having a good job, then somebody else will have to take care of it. Have you seen that mindset?
We do see a lot of ignorance on debt. We can see that because, I mean, just look at the reports that show just how much more, if we look at the types of debts that people had 30, 40 years ago, the overwhelming majority of that debt was in home ownership. Now, the overwhelming majority of the debt is in consumer debt, credit cards, buying a car, right? So I don't know if it's that people don't care about it, but I just think that people place a really high importance on material things, and again, building this image and this lifestyle, traveling and putting money on the credit card, maybe buying the car to impress others. You were giving your example about it, how, that wasn't so important to you. You wanted to make sure you had a car that can get you from point A to point B. It wasn't important for you to impress, your friends. So you didn't buy the Corvette necessarily. You bought a more affordable car that you can pay off and was going to help you get from point A to point B. I do see less and less in that, especially with a younger generation. I mean, I can't speak for the whole generation, but we are a consumer society, and we are consuming an overwhelming amount of debt. And I don't know if that's because people don't care, but I can tell you that people should. People should very much care about that, because things are getting more expensive. It's going to become a hell of a lot harder to retire. People may have to be working a lot longer than they did before. And look at it all. I mean, we're already seeing people in their 70s or 80s working at Walmart.
Yeah.
Right?
That's crazy.
So,
one thing is, and when I'm keeping it to myself, I'll say it here, is that you put yourself in a position where you can invest your resources into good investments, and you see people are just racking up debt. If I was a smart investor, I'd be putting money into whoever owns that debt, because if you spending on your credit card, and I hate to say it this way, but if you max out your credit card, you're paying a lot of interest. And if that interest is going to a bank that I'm investing in, well, then I'm making money off of that, off of your debt. And this is what people don't understand. This is how the rich get richer, because they own that. They give you the ability to go and spend. It's your decision if you want to spend it. You can blame Big Brother all you want to, but the more debt that you have, the more that the banks are going to get richer, and the more the people who invest in those banks are going to continue to get richer. So what side of the coin do you want to be on? Consuming it all and saying, stick your head in the sand, or the one saying, this is a good investment. It's going to make me more money for the future. It's sad to look at it that way, that, you end up making money off somebody else, but we're all adults. We have choices to make. And sometimes it's taking a lot of looking in the mirror to say, what's the best thing for me? I need to get my act together if I want to invest in my future.
Yeah.
But this has been a great episode, Miguel. A long one, but a lot of good information. I know people are going to enjoy it who like to hear about numbers. And even if you're somebody that you would never want to go talk to a professional because you're embarrassed about your own situation, this is still good information for you to know, because hopefully it gives you the courage to go out and reach out to somebody who can help you with that. So, Miguel, what's a good way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, a great way for people to get in contact with me is through LinkedIn. You could find me on LinkedIn. My name is Miguel Delgado. The firm that I'm working with is Legacy Wealth Management. I won't put out my email just to not get it.
You don't want to get inundated, but the best way to reach out to you would be to LinkedIn.
Yeah, and please do. Like I said, I can't take on every client, but I'm more than happy to just be a sounding board. And if I could point you in the right direction, there's a lot of resources out there. So I'm always willing to help. Like I said, I do offer pro bono services. So if you reach out and you think you might qualify for something like that, I'll consider it. And if not, I know plenty of other advisors who may be able to help.
Great. And even if they have a question about, hey, I understand that maybe you might be out of my price league, what are some areas that I could look for that might be more to my situation? And then you might be able to help somebody out there.
Of course.
So thank you very much, Miguel, for coming out. And thank you very much if you've been listening to this episode for about 2 hours. Thank you. It's all good information. If you're enjoying the episode, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends and families. You may not realize it, but those things that take about a half a second to do actually do a lot in helping YouTube promote this episode to the masses, because if they see that people are liking the episode and they're sharing it, it tells them that it's good information and they're going to push it out to a wider audience. And if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, please leave a comment and share the episode as well. Again, we're just trying to get good information out there. It brings me a lot of satisfaction to know that I can provide somebody on here who's giving good information that a lot of people in our generation want to ask, but we don't know who to ask, or we're too embarrassed to ask. So this is something that is important to me, and I hope it's important to you guys as well. So thank you again, Miguel. Everybody have a good one. Take care.